So here we are back in the textbook, and we're going to go back to page 373. Learn a little bit about Mark Twain. It was a pen name of Samuel Longhorn Clemens. He's one of my favorite authors, and I love the Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, which he based on his own boyhood in Missouri, because it really deals with issues like slavery and what's going on in the American South and humanity. But that's kind of a long book. We're going to read what is called an essay. It's only about 5 pages. It's actually pretty short. It's called The Lowest Animal. And if you watch my first video, you understand a little bit about sarcasm and you know where Mark Twain is going here. So as you read, you want to notice how Twain describes the various painstaking experiments he performed and write down questions that you generate during reading, things that we could use in a discussion post maybe. Man is the reasoning animal, such is the claim. I've been studying the traits and dispositions of the lower animals, so-called, and contrasting them with the traits and dispositions of man. I find the result humiliating to me, for it obliges me to renounce my allegiance to the Darwinian theory of the ascent of man from lower animals. Since it now seems plain to me, the theory ought to be vacated in favor of a new and truer one. This new and truer one to be named the descent of man from higher animals. So right here, Twain is trying to be humorous and talking about a lot of the shortcomings of man, how we do things that make us seem like we might not be as smart as other animals. If you think back to the story that we just read, to build a fire and look at the main character in there, and the things that he did that didn't seem to make sense, but yet the things that the dog did that did seem to make sense, you kind of understand where he is going. So he kind of sets up what he's going to prove right here. In proceeding toward this unpleasant conclusion, I have not guessed or speculated or conjectured. Conjecture is a synonym for guess. But I have used what is commonly called the scientific method. That is to say, I have subjected every postulate. So, if you don't know what a word means, for example, a postulate is an assumption. It's kind of like a theory that presented itself to a crucial test of an actual experiment and have adopted it or rejected it according to this result. Thus I have verified and established each step of my course in its turn before advancing to the next. These experiments were made in the London Zoological Gardens and covered many months of painstaking and fatiguing work. So he's overstating things here. You're going to notice the overstatement, the absurdity, perhaps the irony. Before particularizing any of the experiments, I wish to state one or two things which seem to more properly belong in this place than farther along. This, in the interest of clearness, the massed experiments established to my satisfaction certain generalizations. So these are kind of some of the conclusions he came to. The human race is one of a distinct species. It exhibits slight variations in color, stature, mental caliber, that's like smartness, and so on, due to climate, environment, so forth, but a species by itself, and not to be confounded with any other. That the quadruped, which means that you have 4 feet, are a distinct family also. This family exhibits in color, size, food preferences, and so on, a family by itself. The other families, the birds, the fishes, the insects, the reptiles, etc., are more or less distinct also. They are in procession. They are links in the claim, which stretches down from the higher animals to remain at the bottom. So clearly this isn't scientific. He is being humorous here. This is not really an experiment. This is more like observations of walking through the zoo. Some of my experiments were quite curious. In the course of my reading, I had come across a case where many years ago some hunters on our Great Plains organized a buffalo hunt for entertainment of an English earl. That, and to provide some fresh meat for his larder. They had a charming sport. They killed 72 of those great animals and ate part of one of them and left 71 to rot. In order to determine the difference between an anaconda and an earl, if any, I caused 7 young calves to be turned into the anaconda's cage. The grateful reptile immediately crushed one of them and swallowed it and lay back satisfied. It showed no further interest in the calves and no disposition to harm them. So he's comparing man, who kills a bunch of animals and only eats one, and being wasteful with this snake that only eats one of the calves that's put into the cage. So he's saying that it's actually kind of smarter because it doesn't act in this way. I tried this experiment with other anacondas and always the same result. The fact stood proven that the difference between an earl and anaconda is the earl is cruel, the anaconda isn't. The earl wantonly destroys what he has no use for, but the anaconda doesn't. This seemed to suggest the anaconda was not descended from the Earl, and also seemed to suggest the Earl was descended from the anaconda and lost a good deal in the transition. I was aware that many men have accumulated more millions of money than they can ever use, have shown a rabid hunger for more. So now, kind of his next topic is the greed of man and how much man wants to accumulate.